Hawk Beyond 2040, and welcome to a very special edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal Album Review Series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the amazing and impressive catalogue from one of the greatest and most important bands to ever burst onto the scene in the progressive rock genre in the last 30 plus years. And this band were a huge part of the resurgence for the prog rock scene back in the mid 1990s, and they are still going very strong to this day as we speak. And I've been a huge fan of this band for a long time, and this is a band that I've been wanting to talk about on this series for quite a while. And I'm really looking forward to discussing this band's entire catalogue of albums. And this band have had a couple of lineup changes in their history, and they've had numerous singers, but the core of this band has remained very much intact. And this band, quite frankly, in my opinion, needs no introduction whatsoever. I am talking about, of course, the one and only legendary American progressive rock band Spock's Beard. And this is going to be part one of a four-part special where I am going to be discussing the entire catalogue of Spock's Beard. So, for part one, we are going to be discussing all of the Spock's Beard Neal Morse albums. And for part two, we are going to be discussing all of the Spock's Beard Nick DiVirgilio albums. And for part three, we are going to be discussing all of the Spock's Beard Ted Leonard albums. And for part four, we are going to be discussing all of Spock's Beard's live albums. So Spock's Beard was formed in 1982 by brothers Neal and Alan Morse, and the band's name is a reference to an episode from the original Star Trek series called Mirror Mirror, where the crew met a mirror doppelganger of Spock who had a beard, and that's where the name was born, because it was the first and only time that we ever saw Spock with a beard, and the name has stuck ever since. And the original Spock's Beard lineup consisted of keyboardist and vocalist Neal Morse, guitarist Alan Morse, drummer Nick DiVirgilio, and bassist John Bellard. But John Bellard would leave the band shortly before Spock's Beard would put out their first album and would be replaced with bassist Dave Meros, who is still in the band to this day and has played in every single incarnation of Spock's Beard. And as I mentioned earlier, Spock's Beard have had a number of different lineup changes and various singers. But for me, the classic lineup of Spock's Beard is Neal and Alan Morse, Dave Meros, Nick DiVirgilio, and Ryo Okamoto, which I think we can all agree this lineup made some of the greatest music ever in the progressive rock genre. And Spock's Beard's music is very heavily influenced by some of the great progressive rock bands such as Yes, early Genesis, and Gentle Giant. And the band are known for their intricate multi-part vocal harmonies and counterpoint vocals, and lots of different quirky harmonies. And those have always been the signature hallmarks for Spock's Beard, and they still retain a lot of that to this day. And the music itself is very much in the progressive rock style with leanings towards pop and AOR. And as I said, when you hear Spock's Beard, you know straight away it's them, as they have a very distinct sound. So, as I mentioned already, this is going to be the first of four parts. So, for today's special edition, we are going to be talking about the Spock's Beard Neal Morse albums, which is a total of 6 studio albums. And as always, I am going to be talking about each album individually, and I'll be choosing which one I think is the best one. So, this is not going to be an easy challenge. All of these albums are excellent. There are one or two, in my view, that are a little bit better than others, but after tasking myself with listening to all 6 Spock's Beard Neal Morse albums, any one of these albums could easily be an all-time favorite or a number one. And it's quite interesting because from the very beginning, you could straight away hear that sound that we know Spock's beard for. So it's not a case of they sounded different when they started. They had their voice right from the very beginning, and even through all the different lineup changes and various singers, the sound of Spock's beard has always remained intact. It's never really changed that much. And as I said, you know straight away it's them. And having listened to all six, there is some incredible music, in my opinion. So this is going to be quite tough, but at the same time, it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to start with the first album, and this one came out in 1985. And for me, this was the one that really got the ball rolling and helped set the tone for what Spock's Beard were going to be all about. And this one is called The Light. So The Light features the original Spock's Beard lineup consisting of Neal and Alan Morse, Dave Morse, and Nick DiVigilio. And this album is an all-time classic, and a lot of the songs that are featured on this album have pretty much remained with Spock's Beard throughout. They still play a lot of these songs to this day, and it's an absolute masterpiece. And the sound, which I've mentioned before, was pretty much there from the beginning. So you knew straight away when you heard Spock's Beard, you knew it was them. The sound is so recognizable. And although there are only 4 songs on this album, they're incredibly lengthy, and this would be a trademark for Spock's Beard. And a lot of that is due to the writing and composing of Neal Morse, who was pretty much the band's main songwriter. And Neal Morse himself, an incredible musician, a brilliant singer, super talented. Neal Morse can do it all. And in my eyes, no matter what Neal Morse is doing, he has never put out a bad album. And he just continues to get better and better. And he really was the driving force behind Spock's Beard. He pretty much helped these guys become what they are now, and a wonderful composer and super talented. So we're just going to have a quick look. So we've got here the lyrics, and we've got more lyrics here as well. The early days of Spock's Beard, and you know it's back in the day because Neal Morse has got incredibly long hair, and there's more lyrics as well, and production notes and credits and more lyrics. So we've got Neal Morse on vocals, keyboards, acoustic and electric guitar, Alan Morse on electric guitar, cello, mellotron and vocals, Dave Morse on bass and French horn, and Nick DiVigilio on vocals, drums and percussion. And all of the music is written and composed by Neal Morse, and lyrics also written by Neal Morse, with the exception of one track, which was co-written by the brothers Neal and Alan Morse. An excellent album. You couldn't ask for a much stronger or better debut than this. And as I said, there's only 4 tracks, but my goodness, this album really made a statement. And as I said, helped set the tone for what Spock's Beard were going to be all about. So we've got The Light, which is 15 minutes long, one of the greatest Spock's Beard songs of all time, which they still play to this day. Go the Way You Go, which is 12 minutes long, another great track. The Water, which is 23 minutes long. And then we've got On the Edge, which is like 6 minutes. So that's like the shortest song, for Spock's Beard standards. So we've got about 3 epics and 1 short song. Excellent album, great debut, and really Spock's Beard made their mark with this one. But I feel although this album has some classic tracks, I feel that the band and their better music would come much later on. But this is still a very fine and powerful debut album. And listening to this, it was like, wow, I'm pretty much hearing what Spock's Beard sound like today. It's not a lot different apart from a different vocalist, but very enjoyable and absolutely love this one. And the standout tracks for me are The Light and The Water. But if there's any album to start with, if you're looking to get into Spock's Beard, I would highly recommend the debut album. Absolutely wonderful. So there you have it, The Light. Excellent start, and the best was yet to come from Spock's Beard. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1996, and this one is called Beware of Darkness. So Beware of Darkness sees Spock's Beard's lineup expand to a five-piece lineup with the addition of keyboardist Ryo Okamoto. And for me, this is when the Spock's Beard classic lineup was officially born. Ryo Okamoto, an amazing keyboard player, a real powerhouse, and he brings a lot of that classic prog sound with mellotron, Hammond organ, and big, massive orchestral synth work. And for me, he is the secret weapon for Spock's Beard. Neal Morse may have written and composed all of the band's music, but for me, Ryo Okamoto is a huge part of the Spock's Beard sound, and I don't think Spock's Beard would sound quite as they do without Ryo Okamoto's keyboard playing. With all due respect to Neal Morse, who is a super talented musician in his own right, but I think by adding Ryo Okamoto to the mix, it really gives the band that muscular, beefed up sound. And I think really, as great as The Light is, it's a fantastic album. For me, Beware of Darkness was when Spock's Beard really came into their own and became the band that we now know. And this album is an absolute classic. And again, just like the first album, it's got some tracks that will go on to become Spock's Beard staples in their set list and tracks that they still play to this day. So let's have a look, shall we? So we've got lyrics, some more lyrics here as well. Lyrics here as well. I'd have done that. And we've got more lyrics here as well. And more lyrics as well. And we got like credits and production notes. So all of the music is written and composed by Neal Morse, with the exception of one track, which is a cover by George Harrison of the Beatles. And that's where this name of the album came from. It came from a George Harrison song. And the lineup is consisting of Neal Morse on vocals, piano, keyboards, acoustic guitar, and we've got Alan Morse on electric guitars and vocals and cello, Dave Meros on bass and vocals, Ryo Okamoto on keyboards, mellotron and organ, and Nick DiVigilio on drums, percussion, and vocals as well. So we pretty much got the classic Spock's Beard lineup here. So we've got the title track, Beware of Darkness, which is a brilliant opener. Thoughts is one of Spock's Beard's signature songs with quirky multi-vocal parts from Neal Morse and Nick DiVigilio and all of the rest of the band. Brilliant song. The Doorway is excellent. Chautauqua is short but very good. Walking on the Wind is great. Waste Away is great. And then we've got the epic closer, Time Has Come. So we've got a few lengthy tracks here. A couple of the songs may not be as long as the first album, but we still got the epics there. And The standout tracks for me are Beware of Darkness, Thoughts, The Doorway, Walking on the Wind, and Time Has Come. Excellent album, and as I said, this marked the birth of the classic lineup of Spock's Beard. And Neal Morse, he's just all over this album, playing guitars, playing keyboards, singing. He's got a massive presence. Alan Morse ripping it up on guitar. Dave Meros, wonderful bass player, at times reminds me of Chris Squire on his classic Rickenbacker bass. Nick DiVigilio, a powerhouse drummer, an amazing player, and Ryo Okamoto, just a wonderful keyboard player. And as I said before, to me, he is the secret weapon for Spock's Beard. And all five musicians really bring their A game and just sound incredibly tight as a unit. So there you have it. Beware of Darkness. Excellent follow up to The Light. Wonderful stuff and a great introduction for keyboardist Ryo Okamoto. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1988, and this one is called The Kindness of Strangers. So this is a great follow up to the first two albums, and once again, just like with the first two albums, it's got a few tracks on this one that Spock's Beard would still play to this day, and a couple of them would become staples in the band's set list, and even Neal Morse as well as a solo artist. Some of these songs would become a huge part of Neal Morse's musical identity, and he still plays a few of these songs on his own with his own bands. And it's a wonderful album, and as you'd expect, plenty of epics to get your teeth into, and it's a great album from top to bottom. So we're just going to have a quick look. So we've got here lyrics, more lyrics as well, more lyrics as well, and production notes and credits, and who plays on the album. So it's a very good album, very enjoyable, and of course, a couple of epics in there as well. So we've got the first track, which is a great opener, which is like called The Good Don't Last, which is made up of three parts: introduction, The Good Don't Last, and Radiant Is. Tremendous opener. And then we've got In the Mouth of Madness is brilliant. Cakewalk on Easy Street is great. June, one of the greatest and most popular Spock's Beard songs. They still play it to this day, as does Neal Morse as a solo artist. Just a very catchy and very commercial track. And then we've got Strange World, which is then we've got Harm's Way, which is 11 minutes long, absolutely epic. And then we've got the closer, which is like 15 minutes long, Flow, with three parts: True Believer, A Constant Flow of Sound, and Into the Source. Wonderful closer, great way to close it out in vintage Spock's Beard fashion. All five musicians are on absolute fire and at the top of their game, and it's a fantastic album. And the standout tracks from me are The Good Don't Last, June, Harm's Way, and Flow. But just like the first two albums, incredibly strong and very enjoyable from start to finish. So there you have it. The Kindness of Strangers. Excellent album. One of Spock's Beard's greatest, in my opinion. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1999, and this one is called Day for Night. So this is a promotional copy of this album, and it's got one bonus track. And as you'd expect from Spock's Beard, it's absolutely incredible. Some wonderful music. The classic lineup of Spock's Beard sounding incredibly tight. The musicianship is top notch, and all five musicians are on fine form. And all of the compositions are written and composed by Neal Morse, with the exception of one track, which was co-written Neal and Alan Morse and Nick DiVigilio. And top to bottom, it's just hard hitting and proggy at its. And what more can you say, really? These guys are just really going for it and absolutely enjoyable. So we've got Day for Night, which is the title track, which is excellent. Gibberish is another great track. Skin is great. The Distance to the Sun is brilliant. Crack the Big Sky, which is one of my favourite songs from this album. Absolutely brilliant. The Gypsy is great. Can't Get It Wrong, another favourite track of mine. And then we've got the big 21-minute epic of sound, which is made up of 6 parts. So we've got The Healing Colours of Sound, Part 1, My Shoes, Mummy Comes Back, Lay It Down, The Healing, Colours of Sound, Part 2, and My Shoes Revisited. What a way to close out this album. 21 minutes, made up of 6 parts. Prog epic at its very best. Absolutely love it. And what a closer. And that's what I've always loved about this period of Spock's Beard. They really know how to open an album, but they know how to close out an album as well. And in a way, and a lot of that is due to the influence of Neal Morse. A lot of Spock's Beard's albums are kind of like mini movies. You've got like the big epic opener, and then you've got like the big epic ending. So in between, you've got like these little short songs, and then they really take you on the journey to the end. And it's an amazing ride. And as I said, all of the musicians are just on fine form. Ryo's keyboard playing is massive. Dave's bass playing is rock solid. Nick DiVigilio's drumming is just hard hitting. Alan Morse, he doesn't really get enough credit here, but his guitar playing on all of these albums are just incredible. And he knows how to rip it up. And he's not what you would call like a technical marvel like some of the other prog guitarists, but the guy knows how to play and he knows how to burn it up. And Neal Morse, what more can you say? The guy is an absolute powerhouse, and there isn't a single thing he can't do. Wonderful album. Standout tracks for me are Crack the Big Sky, The Healing Colours of Sound, Gibberish, and Day for Night. Excellent album, and Spock's Beard, as far as the classic lineup is concerned, are just getting stronger and stronger, and they can do no wrong. So there you have it. Day for Night, wonderful album and brilliant follow up to the first 3 albums. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2000. And these next 2 albums, for my money, I would consider to be Spock's Beard's greatest albums in their catalogue, certainly as far as this lineup is concerned. And I feel this is where the band were really starting to hit their stride and really starting to hit their musical creative peak. And this one, for me, probably one of my all-time favourite Spock's Beard albums. This one is called V, an absolute classic. Spock's Beard really coming to their own, and holy cow, this album packs a monster punch. And even though there's only 6 tracks on this album, they all deliver. They're all magnificent. They're all epic. And really, for me, Spock's Beard really started to become the band that we know. Obviously, you had the other albums which really helped set the tone and establish themselves. But I think when you get to this album, this was when Spock's Beard were really starting to capture lightning in the bottle and could really do no wrong. And the classic lineup of Morse Brothers, Okamoto, Meros, and DiVigilio, they're just absolutely cooking up a storm. And for me, I don't feel that Spock's Beard have ever sounded better than they do here. They are just absolutely on fire. So let's have a quick look. So we've got the lyrics. Got lyrics as well. And the band's looking very 2000s with the short hair and shades. And we've got all the production notes and all the tracks as well, and more lyrics. So we've got, of course, Neal Morse on keyboards, guitars, and vocals. We've got Dave Meros on bass, Ryo Okamoto on keyboards, Nick Virgilio on drums, percussion, and vocals. And we've got some additional musicians. We've got Katie Hagen on French horn, Chris Carmichael on violin, viola, and cello. He would also go on to be an important collaborator for Neal Morse. Kathy Ann Lord on English horn, and Jerry Pippin on trumpet. Wow, tremendous stuff. Absolutely tremendous. Then we've got tracks we've got here, which are all written and composed by Neal Morse. We've got At the End of the Day, which has got one of the most gorgeous openers you will ever hear. Just absolutely wonderful. Revelation is brilliant. Thoughts Part 2, which is a follow up to Thoughts from Beware of Darkness. Absolutely brilliant. And we've got the very breezy and very commercial All on a Sunday, which is absolutely wonderful. The promotional film for this is hilarious and very typical of the time, but very, very catchy song with lots of great pop hooks and lots of soft guitar playing and strumming of acoustic guitars. Just a very poppy track and probably the most poppy track of the entire album. Goodbye to Yesterday is great. And then we've got the 27-minute epic, The Great Nothing, which is made up of 6 parts. So we've got From Nowhere, One Note, Come Up Breathing, Submerged, Missed Your Calling, and The Great Nothing. Wonderful album. For me, one of the greatest Spock Speed albums of all time, and certainly one of the best albums of modern progressive rock. And it's got everything you want. It's got metal, it's got AOR, it's got pop, it's got rock, it's got prog, it's got everything you want. And holy cow, this is a dynamite album, in my opinion. And the standout tracks for me are At the End of the Day, All on a Sunday, Goodbye to Yesterday, and The Great Nothing. But the whole album, from top to bottom, is just a masterpiece. Absolutely love this one, and one of my all-time favourite Spock Speed albums. So there you have it, the wonderful album, the Spock Speed classic, could very well be the best album of the entire Neal Morse period of Spock Speed. Love it. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2002. And this one could very well be the most important album in Spock Speed's entire catalogue, as it would mark the final ever appearance of Neal Morse, as he would leave Spock Speed just after this album was completed. And this album is a concept album, it's a triple disc recording, and this one is called Snow. So, as I mentioned already, Snow is a concept album which tells a story about a young albino named Jon Snow who possesses extraordinary spiritual and horrific abilities, and he goes on a self discovery due to gaining wisdom and charisma. And of course, as he becomes more famous, we learn that Jon Snow is struggling with the corrupting nature of power as he experiences various betrayals and personal crises. So, as I mentioned already, Snow, it was the final album to feature Neal Morse as he would leave Spock's Beard to go solo, and also because he felt that God was calling out to him to do different things. So Neal Morse would go on a religious path, which would go on to become a huge hallmark in his music. But religion aside, this is a very impressive album. It's a very long album, and I feel that with Snow, although they didn't tour this album until years after, Spock's Beard did a number of special shows for this album where they played it all in its entirety. I feel by this point the classic lineup of Spock's Beard really reached the highest level they could reach, and it is a shame that Neal Morse had to leave. But I always wondered what Spock's Beard could have done after Snow. And I feel that with Snow, this was the band's greatest effort. They have never sounded better than they do here. and they just throw everything out there, including the kitchen sink. And as I said, it's a very long album, lots of complexity, but great music. And I feel Neal Morse as a composer, he really hit his creative peak. But it's just unfortunate that this was the final album, because I would have liked to have seen where Spock's Beard would have gone next had he stayed. But Neal Morse would go on to have a wonderful solo career. He would obviously form different bands with Mike Portnoy. Obviously, he's part of Transatlantic, and he's got other bands like the Neal Morse Band, his solo band, his covers band with Randy George and Mike Portnoy. And Neal Morse just became one of the most prolific solo artists ever. And Snow is just an amazing and powerful album. So, as I said, this is a 3 disc album. So, we've got discs 1 and 2, which makes up the entire Snow album. And then disc 3, we've got some demo tracks and some bonuses as well. Wonderful album. And for me, this is probably Spock's Beard's greatest effort ever. V got the ball rolling, but I feel that V was just like a prelude to Snow. And wow, V and Snow, for my money, as far as this period of the band is concerned, their best albums ever. And Snow, probably their biggest and most important album in their entire catalogue. So let's have a quick look. So what we got here, a big fat book, and there is Snow himself there on his path of self-discovery. And although these are all the lyrics, this is more like the narration of John's journey. As you can see, like there's all different scenes and different parts of the story as we see John embark on his journey, as he experiences various different things on his path to self-discovery. And there's some more here as well. And we've got more here as well. So although these are lyrics, these are more like portrayed as the narration of the story. And we've got all the names of all the different characters as well in the story. And there's more as well. And there's John himself in his suit. So as you can see, like throughout the book here, there's all different scenes as we see John and all his thoughts of what's going on with him. And there's some more stuff there as well. So there's big epic story. And there's the band as well. And we've got all the credits and production notes as well. Very, very powerful album for my money. So all of the compositions are written and composed by Neal Morse, with the exception of one track co-written by Neal and Alan Morse and one contribution from Nick DiVigilio. And as I said, it's a very long album, but very enjoyable. And it's a real journey. It really puts you in the character's head, and you feel like you're actually watching all of these songs and events take place with your very eyes. And it's just an amazing ride. And as I said, for my money, Snow could very well be not only Spock's Beard's most important album for the obvious reasons, but I feel this was their greatest effort. They really put it all out there and delivered a prog masterpiece for the ages. So on disc 1, we've got Made Alive, Overture, which is great. Stranger in a Strange Land is great. Long Time Suffering is great. Welcome to New York City is brilliant. Life Beyond Words is great. The 39th Street Blues, I'm Sick is great. Devil's Got My Throat is great. Open Wide, The Floodgates is brilliant. Open the Gates Part 2 is great. Solitary Soul is brilliant. And then Wind at My Back, which is great. And then we go straight onto disc 2, which we've got the second overture, which is excellent. 4th of July is great. I'm the Guy, which is great. Reflection is great. Carry is great. Looking for Answers is brilliant. Freak Boy is great. All His Vanity is excellent. I'm Dying is great. Freak Boy Part 2 is brilliant, which is like basically carrying on from Freak Boy. Devil's Got My Throat Revisited is great. Snow's Night Out is great. And then we got this very fun track called Ladies and Gentlemen, Mr. Ryo Okamoto on the keyboards, which is a fun track, which is like a little short track. And then we got I Will Go. And then we got Made Alive Again, which goes straight into Wind at My Back. Excellent album, very long. Got to be in the right frame of mind for this, but it's an incredible journey. And there's no wasted note here, no dull moments whatsoever. It's just great. And then on disc 3, we've got like some demo tracks and some live acoustic tracks, and we got one cover of a Yes song, South Side of the Sky, which, no disrespect to Yes, I think Spock's Beard play it probably better than Yes. It's very hard hitting, very enjoyable. Then we got Good Don't Last, Open Wide, The Floodgates live acoustic, which is great. Working on Devil, Fiddly Disco, Looking for Answers, which is another live acoustic track, which is great. Stranger in a Strange Land demo. Wouldn't even know it was a demo because Spock's Beard played it so well. And 4 o'clock is great. Working on Ryo solo, which is just like, just a little jam there of Ryo on the keyboards. Lost bass solo demo, which is great. The Lights live acoustic, which is great. And then we've got Working on I Will Go, which is all good. Standout tracks for me. I wouldn't really say there is a standout track. I think the entire piece is epic. Obviously there are some parts I enjoy a lot. Like Stranger in a Strange Land and Welcome to New York and Devil's Got My Throat and Solitary Soul. They're great as well. And I enjoyed the second overture, All Is Vanity and I'm Dying and Freak Boys parts 1 and 2, Looking for Answers and Made Alive Again and Wind at My Back. They're all great. And, obviously Spock's Beard's cover version of Yes's South Side of the Sky is great on disc 3. But as I said, I think with Snow, it's one of those albums, there's no standout track. It's just like one big piece just spread out on 2 discs. But the whole thing is just absolutely wonderful, in my opinion. So it's very hard to pick out the standout track because they're not really like tracks, they're more like chapters. But those ones that I mentioned, they really stood out to me. But the whole album, from top to bottom, all 3 discs, really enjoyed listening to this one a lot and loved it so much. So there you have it. Snow, which would mark, sadly, the end as Neal Morse would leave Spock's Beard, but what a way to go out and what a way to close out this period of the band. Tremendous stuff. Love it. So, which Spock's Beard Neal Morse album do I think is the best one? Well, they're all good, they're all different. There are some, in my view, that are a little bit better than others, but quite honestly, there is no bad album. Not just in Spock's Beard's entire catalogue, but during this period of the band, they're all good. It's very hard to choose which one is the best one because, as I said at the beginning, any of these albums could easily be a number one or an all-time favourite. But I feel that, as great as the earlier albums are, and they're excellent, I felt that the last two was when they really started to hit their peak and they really became tight as a band. And for me, as I said, the classic lineup were just on absolute fire and could do no wrong. So, as much as I enjoyed all of these albums, the one that I'm going with, which I feel is the best one, and certainly their most important one of all time, is of course Snow. Snow, for my money, was Spock's Beard really hit their peak, and it is sad that this was the final album with Neal Morse. But what a way to go out! And for my money, this was Spock's Beard's greatest effort, and they just put it all out there and just really said, you know what, screw radio play, screw all the pop leanings. We're going to make the prog album we want to make, and these guys didn't disappoint. They delivered a modern prog masterpiece. Love this one so much, and I really enjoyed listening to the whole thing. It is a real journey. V is great, but I feel to get to Snow, we have to have V first, because without V, we probably wouldn't have this. We probably may have done, but I don't think you get to Snow until we have V first, or the other albums before that, because I feel that with all of this portion of Spock's Beard's catalogue, they were just building up to this, and I feel that V was kind of like the prologue for Snow, maybe like a warm up, if you go by the cover, which leads to this. It's just an amazing payoff, in my opinion. So there you have it. Snow, for my money, the best Spock's Beard Neal Morse album of the entire catalogue, and dare I say, overall, Spock's Beard's best album of all time. Love it. Can't go wrong with this, and I highly recommend Snow to anyone. And the live box set of Snow is even better. Highly recommend you check that one out as well. So there you have it, Snow, the best Spock's Beard album of the Neal Morse period, as far as I'm concerned. Love it. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Spock's Beard Neal Morse album? Is it The Light, Beware of Darkness, The Kindness of Strangers, Day for Night, V, or Snow? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series, where I will be back with part two of this four-part special, where I am going to be discussing all of the Spock's Beard Nick DiVigilio albums. So make sure you don't miss that. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.